Good evening. Welcome to the Politica Podcast. Tonight we have Andrew Badger with us, and Andrew's a candidate for Congress. And, a lot of people I talk to ask me who you are, and I didn't know you that well, so I thought we'd have a conversation. But why don't you tell our audience just a little bit about you?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's great to be here. I'm really excited to speak with you today. I'm running as a candidate for Congressional District 1 in Utah as a Republican in the 2022 midterms. Look, I think fundamentally our country is heading in the wrong direction. I think the establishment GOP is not getting the job done. For me personally, one of the things that really churned my mind with how our country is going is what happened in Afghanistan. Seeing the utter collapse and withdrawal of our forces there had a really profound impact on me. I grew up here in Utah. It shaped and molded who I am. I remember being in my 10th grade geography class and seeing what happened on 9/11. And that instilled with me this desire to serve our country, and eventually deployed to Afghanistan as an intelligence officer. I was working on the ground, supporting our military, working side by side with our warfighters. And, I've seen the sacrifice our country made to fight terrorists there. And to see what happened there, it was just utterly, disastrous. And the media is not holding them accountable. The GOP is not holding them accountable. And then if we look at what's happening here domestically as well, our borders are broken. Our gas is unaffordable. Our speech is being censored. Our children are being taught to hate in school. And, the GOP is doing nothing about it. So look, I'm a pretty regular guy. I have a 9-to-5 day job. I work in management consulting, but I just can't let this go on anymore.
Yeah.
And I want to throw my hat in the ring. I want to get in there and I want to do my best. And
So what are you doing now?
So I work for a management consulting firm called McKinsey. I've been doing risk management
very good.
across, mostly in Africa, Middle East. So.
Boy, McKinsey, that's a pretty good ticket to punch right there.
Yeah.
So tell me about your education. Where'd you go to school? And
Right. So again, I was raised here in Utah. Went to public schools. Went to Timpview High School down in Provo. Just had a conversation the other day about what can we do to fix our schools. And look, one of the things I mentioned was in my AP US history, my AP government class, that's where I really learned a love of American history. It's where I learned about what was happening in our world and how politics works. Miss McKay, who I still stay in touch with, I'm really grateful for her. And so that that educational experience here really shaped who I am. I was fortunate enough to go out to Harvard back east, where again I was able to, I think, get a great education. This was
So was that as an undergraduate then?
Yeah, for my undergraduate degree. This was 2009, so a little bit less of the wokeism had infected there.
Right.
Most of my coursework focused on the Roman Empire. I had international relations classes taught by former Reagan officials. I was a research assistant to an Air Force general. But actually, one of the things about being there was I was a lone conservative in a lion's den.
Right.
And I really had to defend conservative
especially
values.
as an undergrad, right?
Exactly.
It's not quite as bad at the Harvard Business School.
Yeah, no, exactly. A little more conservative
yeah.
there. But I had to learn how to defend conservative values, how to, really why I believed what I believed. In terms of my education, I was also able to go and study diplomacy at Oxford. Really, it was a course for diplomats, and so I was learning the ins and outs of global trade, how negotiations work in terms of those
Was
deals.
that after you got your first job, or was that just you just wanted to do that?
Yeah, so I was in the intelligence officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency under the Department of Defense. My first boss was Michael Flynn. I did about...
So you worked directly for Flynn?
Well, he was the director at the the started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was one of his deputy director was a close mentor of mine and still is. So I did 5 years. I did a deployment to Afghanistan. I was stationed in Stuttgart, Germany, doing counterterrorism work across Africa. I eventually went to Oxford to get my master's in diplomacy. And there again was, Oxford's actually a fairly conservative institution. Most of the conservative
Right.
politicians in the UK go there. But again, I had to learn how to defend my positions, conservative ideology. We actually did a class debate about President Trump's moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And I had to win over a class full of students from the Middle East, from Russia, from China. And we had this class debate. And I was able to persuade a lot of them to join.
So what was that like? What were their complaints about that?
Yeah, so a lot of people I think overseas had a misunderstanding of who President Trump was. They don't really understand American conservatism or American right-wing values. And look, be able to engage with them and explain, this is what America is about. And once you do that, once you explain federalism, once you explain limited government, people kind of like, yeah, this makes sense. Actually, Senator Mike Lee came and spoke to the Oxford Union when I was there.
Oh, really?
And it was really impressive because I was sitting next to some British
Well, he's
students.
a guy that certainly understands federalism.
And he explained the Federalist system, James Madison, Federalist number 10. And I remember walking away with 2 British students, and they're like, you know what? I thought this Senator Lee was going to be this right-wing guy, but everything he explained makes sense.
Right.
And that's the thing about the conservative ideology. Once you understand conservatism, once you understand the value of limited government, of individual liberties, of a free market enterprise, it really just makes sense. And that's what we need to do, is really need to just distill these things down and be able to explain it to a broader audience, because our message wins at the end of the day when people really understand it.
Well, I think that really goes back to the power of America. I mean, just before we started, I was talking to this young man from Venezuela, and we were talking a little bit about how things changed there when Chavez came in, and I really hate that this Marxist Leninist philosophy is entering into our government, and it just doesn't make any sense, right? It's so anti the foundation of our government itself, right?
No, it's true. And one of the things, I was a case officer, so my job was to recruit basically human informants who could, provide us plans and intentions of our enemies to support our military. So I had to work with foreigners up close and personal. And a lot of the foreigners who risked their life to help us did so because they believed in America. I mean, I worked in Afghanistan. Was working with someone who was providing us information. And he said, look, I hope the Republicans win, because I know you guys aren't going to let us down. I believe in America.
Didn't that make you sick when what happened with Biden with the withdrawal from Afghanistan? That had to have just crushed you.
It's the greatest strategic defeat in our country's history. And it's far worse than what happened in Vietnam. And media, the GOP, no one is talking about it. Where's the commission to hold this administration accountable for what happened in Afghanistan? I actually went to a town hall with Congressman John Curtis, and I called him out. I said, why did you support an impeachment inquiry against President Trump for January 6th when we didn't even know what evidence or information there was at the time? But now you're not calling for a similar inquiry against President Biden, who just effectively armed a terrorist state. The Taliban are close allies with al-Qaeda, and we can't forget, al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11. They're still plotting. The war's not over just because we want it to be over. And now that we're fighting them,
we just empowered them though with this.
We just empowered them with state-of-the-art night vision goggles, body armor, advanced M4 rifles, not to mention Black Hawk helicopters, MRAP armored vehicles. I mean, this is a huge deal. And we also still have Americans left behind enemy lines. I mean, that's unfathomable.
That's the thing that really gets at me, because I think we don't leave men behind.
No, you never leave a man behind.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. And it's not just the people that we left behind, though. It's the people that you recruited.
Yeah.
Right? That believed in America, that wanted to help, and most of them are probably dead now.
To be honest, I can't even think about it. I mean, the people I worked with, they risked their lives, they risked their families' lives on faith in us, and we let them down. And look, I mean, this is going to have repercussions for probably the rest of my life. I mean, look at our allies in the world, and look how they saw we just kind of cut and run. President Trump had a conditions-based withdrawal where he said, look, if the Taliban, you break this, you're gonna feel the price. President Biden didn't do that. He just said, look, we're cutting and running no matter what. And this is why, this is something I'm really running on, is we need to reform our military. There's a huge crisis right now in our military. We have woke generals preaching about white rage over the summer when the Taliban was planning their offensive. And we need to clean house. We need less General Mark Milley. We need to get back to General George S. Patton. Right. And we need to equip our military with state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art weapons. We need a huge investment in our military because, look, China, Russia, they're not messing around. And if you're following what's happening, Russia just shot down a satellite. China is increasingly threatening Taiwan. I mean, these are huge issues. They just tested a hypersonic flight vehicle, which basically is a nuclear weapon that can maneuver and go Mach 5. And our Pentagon, at least according to the Financial Times, couldn't even understand the physics behind it. I mean, that shows how far behind we are. I mean, this is a Sputnik moment, and we need to reform our military, and we need to do it now. Right. I mean, I think we talk about critical race theory in our schools, but our critical race theory is being taught in our military.
Yeah, James Lindsay was in here yesterday, 2 days ago, and when I really dig into that, one of the things I'm doing in the legislature is trying to address that issue. And the more I study it, the more I think this is bad, right? People don't understand the depth behind this philosophical movement. Really, it's the new state religion. And when I read about people like General Milley and some of the things that he said, I just think, man, how can you have a woke army?
You can't. There's never been a woke army that's fought and won. I mean, critical race theory, I'm sure what Mr. Lindsay spoke about, is about dividing people based upon your class, based upon your gender, your race. And a divided army cannot fight effectively. I mean, especially, look, America is an experiment. Most nations throughout history have been based upon, race, a common culture. I mean, we're an experiment in the sense of we have a shared ideology, we have a shared belief in the Constitution. We come from all over the world. And that's how we fought effectively, is we fought united. And so this is China's best dream, is to divide our country, divide our military based upon their ethnicity and race. I mean, you have a platoon, you could have Hispanic Americans, you could have African Americans, and they should be fighting as one. We should be fighting as Team America.
E pluribus unum.
Exactly. And so, look, I think this critical race theory, it's dangerous for our schools, and I have proposals about how we can combat that at the federal level. I think it should be fundamentally at the state level with great statesmen like yourself.
Right.
But critical race theory in our military, I mean, that's even more dangerous when you think about it, because if you lose a war, that's it. There's no coming back from that. So we need to really address this issue, and I don't think we have much time. China and Russia, again, are advancing on us every day, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. We need to get our military to become the most lethal fighting power in the world, because we need peace through strength. It's Teddy Roosevelt. Carry a big stick and speak softly.
Right.
We should be the most feared military in the world, but we should also not be engaging in nation building and building democracy all over the world. So that's what I think we need to return to.
Yeah, and one of the problems I have with this whole philosophy too is it's anti-God. It really pushes God out of society, and you think about communism and look at China now. I mean, he's a dictator for life now, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have some real enemies that we need to wake up.
Yeah. No, I mean, the fundamental base of communism is anti-theistic.
Right.
I mean, what's the Soviets' first thing they did was destroy the churches. And what we don't talk about here as well is, I mean, China's been persecuting Christians pretty aggressively over the last 5 years. I mean, they've banned the Bible. You can't even get the Bible. They've been prosecuting on these underground Christian churches. I mean, they'll go into people's homes, they'll take down a picture of Jesus, and they'll put up a picture of President Xi.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people we're competing against. And China declared war against us a long time ago. I mean, we've had basically the establishment's been accommodating them, allowing them to be part of the World Trade Organization, so which means that they enjoy the best trade terms as any country in the world. We've pretty much handed over our IP and intellectual property. We've allowed them to provide subsidies to their state companies, which are competing against our free market companies. So this is a huge issue, and they're playing to win. And we've got to start taking this threat more seriously. And you look at President Biden, and he's not doing that. And also, if you look at the establishment GOP, you look at Mitch McConnell, you look at Mitt Romney. These are guys that are going to fight for our values, and especially not here, but also not abroad.
Right. So let's turn to more domestic issues. The economy.
Yeah.
These government shutdowns that we have, and now you hear all this talk about Omicron and the next phase, right? And I'm a little bit worried about the state of our economy and keeping it running. So what's your philosophy in terms of the role of government and what should government be doing? And
so I think it's first actually important to understand what our opponents are trying to do. So socialism, a lot of people might not know what that actually is. I mean, it's state control of the economy, state control of the means of production. And I mean, it's basically having the DMV run your economy, the same people at the DMV, or having the VA, having that be your national health service. So that's what we have to fight against. We need a free market economy. And I think, but as well, the new right, and this is kind of a new movement emerging. You see it with Blake Masters, who's running for Senate in Arizona, J.D. Vance, who's running for Senate in Ohio. The old GOP was kind of neoconservative branch. It's all about GDP.
Right.
The only thing that matters is GDP. And we have to move beyond that a little bit. I mean, look, I want tax cuts as well, but that's not the end all. I mean, we need an economy that works for the American family. And that should be our goal, is a flourishing human society, not kind of tied to these abstract, growth terms of 5% versus 4%, when we're going into a town, stripping out the manufacturing base, shipping it to China, and we're having fentanyl being pumped into these towns, and then saying, well, but our GDP went up 10 points. We need to be thinking about the American family, and we need to return our manufacturing base back to the United States. I mean, this is why it's so important. What happened with the coronavirus, we're seeing the supply chain demands. My neighbor works in the farming industry, and he has equipment stuck off the coast of Georgia on these huge ships, and he can't get it in. Right. I mean, when he tries to ship alfalfa hay to China or any other place, I mean, he's having to pay incredible fees. So, I mean, I've worked in international business the last 3 years. I've been really at the heart of business. I studied international trade.
So what did you do with McKinsey?
I do risk management, And, at Oxford as well, I studied international trade. And, I mean, the big point here is we need to kind of go back to what President Trump was doing. We need to make these trade deals work for the American people again. And that's the thing people don't realize is, China's been taking advantage of these deals. A lot of these deals have been just helping BlackRock, kind of Wall Street. And we need, I think what President Trump did with reforming NAFTA, again, doesn't get a lot of credit for reforming the free trade deal with South Korea. I mean, these things really impact us at home, and we need to make sure that we're fighting again for an America first foreign policy. And what we're seeing right now is an America last foreign policy with President Biden, and we're seeing the establishment GOP just let him get away with it.
Well, I've been reading a little bit about this Build Back Better that they're doing, and I think, man, I wish you'd go build somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But proposals like taxes on unrealized capital gains.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't understand. They say, well, it only applies to people with over 100 billion in assets, but you think, well, what happens to capital structure?
Yeah.
Right? Are these people going to continue to leave their money into growth assets that basically produce capital gains, right? Especially when they're unrealized, right?
Yeah.
What does an entrepreneur do that's trying to raise money, right? And all of a sudden they do a new raise and their wealth goes through the roof, but it's not liquid, right?
I think the challenge here is the left is using this crisis to exert government control over our economy like we've never seen before. I mean, we forget, but President Biden just tried to use the CDC to prevent landowners from evictions. I mean, that's our fundamental right, is right to property, private property. And he was trying to stall it out through the courts, which is even worse because he's trying to subvert the rule of law. I mean, and as well as this Build Back Better law, I mean, there's 90,000 new IRS agents. And I mean, these guys aren't just going to be going after Elon Musk anymore.
Right.
They're going to be going after the average American.
Yeah, so $500 or more.
Yeah.
Right, in a transaction.
Yeah, in your bank account.
And basically that information's going directly to the IRS.
Yeah.
And you think, some of those transactions are a little bit complicated because, you have money coming in that's not necessarily earnings, right? And how do you divide all those things? And the problem is someone, if you're attacking people at that level, they don't have the attorneys, they don't have the tax lawyers that can really sort a lot of these things out.
Yeah. I mean, look, if there's anyone we should be going after for taxes, it's the big tech companies like Google, Apple, who are, making huge profits and not paying any taxes because they're, all stationed in the Cayman Islands or Ireland. I mean, those are the people we need to start paying their fair share of taxes. We need to be cutting taxes for the regular
people don't realize
Americans.
how much money, Apple had over $100 billion.
Yeah.
In Ireland, and Trump lowers the taxes, on corporations, and all of a sudden they repatriated all that money, right? People don't realize what's really going on, right? And
I think this is something, again, part of this new right movement is we can't just let big business do whatever they want. I mean, we need to hold them accountable. And I think that's what we're seeing with Governor Ron DeSantis. I mean, he said, look, this vaccine mandate is illegal. I don't care if you're a private company or not. We saw the alternative with Governor Kristi Noem. She said, well, they're private companies. There's nothing we can do about it. The problem is big business can violate your fundamental rights just as much as big government can.
Right.
And the most dangerous thing about what we're seeing right now is the confluence between big business and big government. That's literally the definition of fascism, is that big government basically uses business to advance its interests. And that's what's so dangerous about this mandate, this vaccine mandate, is that government is basically coercing the private sector to do its will. And I'm just really disappointed with the GOP, on their vote yesterday to extend the debt ceiling. I think we had huge leverage where basically we could have said, look, until you remove this vaccine mandate from government funding, we're not going to fund the government. And if there is any shutdown, that's on the Democrats. Because the courts, the Fifth Circuit among them, has already put a stand-down order on this vaccine mandate. So how can the government fund something which the courts have already put a pause on? We had tremendous leverage, but you have guys like Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, who again, just are spineless. They're pretty much speed bumps in terms of the march of progressivism. And we have to contrast that within our party of guys like Mike Lee, of Ron DeSantis, who are willing to fight back. And we just lost. I saw an interview with Senator Romney in the Deseret News where he said, yeah, I'm against the vaccine mandate, but we have this new virus strain. It's too difficult to kind of push back on this way. And it's like, well, do you really believe this vaccine mandate is a fundamental violation of our rights? Because if you did, you would do everything within our power to restore our rights.
Right.
And that's what I think the difference is between what we call rhinos and true conservatives is they have a core fundamental understanding of our principles, and they're not afraid of offending the swamp.
Yeah, and they realize that if you denigrate the personal liberties of individuals, right? And people don't understand that liberty really is an individual thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to a group, right? And that's one of the problems I have with this, this critical race theory is this tribalism that's going on, right? And people somehow are confused in thinking that your group identity is what really drives you, right? And liberty doesn't belong to the group; it belongs to the individuals, right? And we have to start thinking more about that, I think.
So I think it's really important we actually understand what leftism is. We throw around these terms quite often. We don't really know what they mean. I think two key variables of leftism: one is a belief that the government should govern society, control society, the economy, all aspects of a free society. And two is this idea of collectivism versus individualism, where your rights come from your collective group. This is what basically, in the ancient world, your rights came from your family or your tribe. And through the Enlightenment, through Christianity, we came to understand a sovereign individual. And a sovereign individual means you are the highest authority for yourself. And through John Locke, other philosophers, we recognize, look, you can't be my king over me. I have to consent for you to rule over me. And so this idea of individualism, it's so embedded in our minds, we don't quite comprehend it and realize just how important it is. But if you look at leftism, it's all about collectivism. It's about where you are in the group. And that's actually the fundamental premise of CRT, critical race theory. And that's what we see in China. I had, when I was studying diplomacy at Oxford, pretty intense conversations with the Chinese diplomat, just trying to understand their philosophy and how they approach the world. And they're terrified of chaos. So that's why they want this social harmony. Right. They want order. And basically order comes through, you don't speak out, you're part of the group, you go along with the group, whatever they say.
Well, now their movement towards this social credit score is just,
we're seeing it in Europe as well.
Yeah.
You have to scan QR codes to go into a restaurant in France. They're checking the same thing in New York City or LA. We're not that far away from that.
I have people that say, look, you've been vaccinated and you had COVID and you think that's important for you. And they said, well, why are you fighting a vaccine mandate? And I said, because it's about the liberty of the individual.
Yeah.
Right.
The left thinks they're playing this little trick where they say, if you're against the vaccine mandate, you're an anti-vaxxer.
Right.
There's a difference. You can be for vaccines, but against mandates.
Yeah.
And they try to confluence that. It's one of their little tricks they do. And we should be fighting back. There's a difference, again, between forcing people to take a vaccine to be a part of our society and believing in vaccines or not. Look, I think individuals should make that choice themselves. And that's actually why the Fifth Court, if you look at their what they put out for why they put the standout orders, because it makes no differentiation among people. Individuals know their personal medical history better than anyone else. Some people have natural immunity. Natural immunity is real.
Right.
And to have this force this vaccine mandate upon everyone, whether they have natural immunity or not, or maybe they have an allergy to something, that's just, it's criminal. So again, people should get vaccinated if they want to, but again, we can't, use the government to force everyone,
right?
Because the problem is,
and debate isn't about a vaccine, and it's not about science.
It's about government overreach.
It's about government overreach.
And the problem is, once you empower government with the capabilities, you don't know what's going to happen. There's unintended consequences. And so look, we established Homeland Security after 9/11. Again, another emergency, another crisis. We were terrified, we were worried. Look at Homeland Security now is massive. Right. They're going after things that have nothing to do with counterterrorism, nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. It's the same thing. If we give government this power now in this crisis, what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now? We don't know. And that's why it's so dangerous. And I would say to the left, there's compromise here. Do you really want to empower government with this power and have someone like President Trump come into power again?
Yeah.
That should be their worst nightmare, right?
Right.
And so look, this is a fair compromise. We should allow individuals to make these decisions that's best for them. And again, I'm just incredibly disappointed with GOP not using. We had leverage, which we could have used to remove these vaccine mandates until the courts had ruled on them, and we just waved the white flag. And I just don't understand why. I just don't understand, why we feel this sense of weakness. And it's almost like the DC establishment knows that in this kind of chicken game.
Where do you think that philosophy comes from? In people just, they say, well, I got to go along, right? I've got to be part of the party. I've got to, and this seat you're running for is now probably one of the safest conservative seats in the country.
Exactly.
Right? Which means we ought to have someone that's conservative sitting in that seat, right?
Yeah.
And
look, I was a case officer. My job was to try to understand human nature. I think it comes back to this idea of, we humans want to belong to a group. And when we're kind of ostracized from a group, we get a little bit worried about that. I think what happens is these rhinos go to DC. They want to accommodate the swamp. They don't want to be ostracized. They want to be invited to these cocktail parties at these fancy clubs. I know it's kind of cliche, but it's real. You don't want to be stigmatized in the media. So that's why I think you have people like Mitt Romney who get in there and basically become almost controlled opposition, to use the term. And I think look, I wouldn't be running for this seat if we had a true conservative fighter in there. But if you look at Congressman Blake Moore, he's voted for the January 6th Commission, which is a pretty big deal because that language in that bill labeled Americans domestic terrorists. We're labeling Americans domestic terrorists. So you don't expect the
and look at where that's
system.
gone now. They Garland put out this thing labeling people that show up at school board meetings domestic terrorists.
It's one of the greatest threats is our politicalization of our security services. And so by passing that bill that labels Americans domestic terrorists, that is a huge violation of our liberties and rights, and that's very dangerous. Second, Blake Moore voted for Liz Cheney as the party conference chair. I didn't really realize this myself, but this is a big deal. That's the third highest position in the entire GOP. That position as well is the one that defines the agenda for the party. So by voting for Liz Cheney, you're basically endorsing this vision of the GOP of neoconservatism, wars abroad, tax cuts at any cost, and then just basically a one-trick pony of going after Trump. Mind you, doing nothing against President Biden. So those two things
that really bugs me. Right?
Yeah,
exactly. I say it's fine, go after President Trump, but then you don't go after Biden for some of the stupid things that are going on now.
People don't realize is that the left is going harder against Trump now, who's been out of office for a year, than we are against President Biden, who's, we had the Afghanistan withdrawal, we had this illegal vaccine mandate, lying, the Hunter Biden, who knows what's going on there. We're not doing anything about it. And there's, the left is subpoenaing, Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon, and just got indicted. They've still got their crosshairs on President Trump, and that's all Liz Cheney is focused on. So again, going back to why I'm running and why Blake is voting for these things, I don't understand it. He's only congressman who voted for the January 6th Commission and Liz Cheney, who then he had come out and do a fundraiser for him, or I guess she didn't show up, but she sponsored it. So, this is why I'm running, because we have a huge crisis in our country. We don't have anyone standing back and fighting for our interests. And this establishment, again, it's big business, it's big government, it's part of the GOP, and they're not, they're trampling our rights, and we need someone who's going to be kind of a champion for the people and start pushing back against that. And I'm very confident there's this new generation of young conservative leaders coming up, and we're going to fight back. We've got the energy, and we're not going to let people down. We're tired of this GOP, waving the white flag at any confrontation. And we want to take the fight to the left. It's time we stop playing defense. It's time we go on the offense and start defining the legislative agenda. Look in Texas. Instead of just waiting for the left to push more abortion laws, we said, no, we're going to go on the offense. We're going to push this, heartbeat bill and get that passed. It's the same thing with gun rights. We need to stop letting the left define the terms, and we need to start going and actually repealing some of these restrictions which violate our Second Amendment.
Right.
So I think this is the big shift. We have this old generation of GOP, just kind of appeasement, accommodate the left. And we have this new wave of fighters, Madison Cawthorn, those type of guys who are saying, look, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to fight back. We're going to define the terms of our agenda, and we're going to start pushing forward with it. And we need to use the institutions and the power of state to accomplish that. So, that's what I hope to be a part of in fighting for the interests of Utah.
Very good. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
I'm Jefferson Shoup. I'm the author of The Bathwater Brigade. It's a novel for teens and adults to help them be resilient in figuring out life. You can get it at bathwaterbrigade.com or amazon.com.
Welcome back to the Politica Podcast. We're here with Andrew Badger, and Andrew's a candidate for Congress, and I'm impressed with your educational background. Undergraduate from Harvard, master's degree from Oxford. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty amazing. McKinsey and Company, right? You've achieved a lot in your career and done a lot there. Going into office, I think it's important to have people that are well educated, that have read the classics, have read history, who understand things that have happened, understand the founding of our country, the whole concept of federalism, and for me that's a really important thing. But how do you touch the moms and dads out there, right?
Yeah,
the typical John Q. Public voter, right?
So it's a great question, and I've been fortunate to receive a really good education. I think what I was taught in the public schools in Utah were actually very good. I was able to go through public school my whole life, and that's where I really learned a love of our country. Saying the Pledge of Allegiance, participating in 4th of July parades, those type of things really instilled that patriotism in me. The first job I had outside of graduating from college was working as a ranch hand out in Vernal. So a patient of my dad's was named Charlie. He's a Native American. And I went out there with my best friend for the summer and worked as a ranch hand. It was a little bit different from most of my friends from Harvard who went into banking or finance or that type of thing. But I have to be honest, that's where I really learned a lot of, learned about the world in the way that you can't learn at these institutions. Learned the value of hard work, learned what these people and, the average workers are going through, working on the oil rigs out there, seeing firsthand the struggles to pay the bills, seeing firsthand how government overreach and regulations can really hurt our ranchers and our farmers. So it's really a valuable lesson to me. I still go out there and meet with him, ride horses. And he taught me a lot of valuable lessons. And the first thing he said to me on day one was, look, after I'm done with you, you're not going to be afraid of nothing. And so, I think that's what I try to stay close to the average person, regular people. I just got engaged. I'm looking to start a family soon.
Very good.
This is really important for me as well. I want to have the best opportunities for my children. To go to a school and be taught to love their country, to have our parents to have control over that education. So, it's really important to me to stay in touch with people and really just understand what drives, the average voter, the average, citizen.
How do you keep yourself from getting sucked into the machine?
That's a good question.
I found that, being in the Senate, that, there's a piece of that's like belonging to a country club. It's it's an association between people that it rivals the best things I've seen.
Yeah.
And I can see how people can get sucked into that whole.
Yeah.
You called it a swamp earlier, and
it is a swamp.
There's actually aspects of it that really are swamp, but
I think it goes back to Utah. Growing up here, 4th of July parade, Stadium of Fire. These things really molded me into the man I am today. And I've always been in the lion's den defending conservative values. I've been at Harvard. I've been in the intelligence community. I've been working these corporations. And I've always had to speak out and defend our values. And I'm kind of used to that role. I mean, it toughens you up because you have to you can't just say platitudes. You have to be able to back it up and explain why you believe certain things. So look, I've always been an outsider in that sense. I stay close to all my family and friends. I've, across the state, across the nation. I always just try to listen to people, what they're saying, and really just listen. And I think that's the problem with the establishment right now. They're just not listening to the people. I mean, election integrity is a huge issue. We need to restore confidence in our elections. And our leaders aren't listening. They just write it off. I mean, I've watched town halls with Blake Moore where people keep asking about election integrity. And I say, oh, well, it's a state's issue, this type of thing. We can't do anything about it. But what are you talking about? The federal government has a vested interest in the union, upholding the elections. If New York starts having non-U.S. citizen immigrants start voting, that impacts the rest of the union. Or if Pennsylvania changes the laws that were set by the legislature and starts setting them through the courts, which is against the state constitution, that impacts the union. If Facebook starts investing $400 million to help change local election rules, that impacts the union. I mean, so these are the types of things we need to start listening to the people. And that's why I think we have, again, this unaccountable establishment who's not listening. And that's, why I'm running. I'm pretty active on social media and speaking with people and listening to them, and they just don't feel being heard. And again, if you go to these town halls, I've been to a few of them with John Curtis and others, and the questions the people are asking, the voters of Utah, and what our representatives are doing, there's a huge disconnect here. There's just this separation, and we need to start listening to the voters again.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, and not getting so full of yourself that you think you're in a different class, because we're not in a different class, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we have a unique society where you move here, you work hard, you're an American. You're not.
Yeah.
You're not defined by the group that you're part of, and promoting the idea of individual liberty is so important to me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you're kind of aligned with that line of thinking, right?
Well, that's why I love speaking with immigrants who come to our country, because they've seen how bad the world can be. Now, I've been the same way. I've been outside of Utah. I've been overseas fighting our nation's wars. I mean, I've seen how bad the world can be. I've been in Africa. I've been in the Middle East. I've been in Afghanistan. I've been, the governments there are totally corrupt. They violate the rights of their people. So that's why we have immigrants who come to this country from places like Venezuela. They love America. They appreciate our freedoms, and they're willing to fight for them. And so that's why I think this establishment ruling class has just become so complacent. They don't truly value and appreciate our rights and liberties. And that's why I think they just don't fight for them as hard. And so that's why I love speaking with immigrants who are just I mean, look at the basketball player for the Boston Celtics.
Oh my gosh, I was going to bring that up before in it.
Mr. Freedom.
Yeah. I mean, he changed his name to Freedom after he became a citizen, right?
And he speaks out on these issues. He recognizes the threat posed by China. I mean, look at LeBron James. He won't say anything about China.
Right.
Because he's terrified.
But he'll talk about what idiots
speak
our
about
police
BLM,
are. Right?
et cetera. What's actually very interesting is the Democrats just blocked provision pushed forward by Senator Rubio, which is the No Slave Labor Act in the recent spending bill. They blocked that. And what we forget is China has 1 million slaves in Western China, the Uyghurs. These are the people who are producing our cotton, for companies like Nike, H&M. I mean, it's a modern slave state, and we're not speaking out against it, which is pretty amazing, because we're trying to turn against ourselves and condemn American history because of slavery. But we're not speaking out against modern day slavery, which is very fascinating when you think about it.
Right, especially since I don't know a single person that was a slave or that owned slaves.
Yeah, exactly.
Personally, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and I mean, you bring up an interesting point in China. It's interesting how that whole bill got shut down in the Utah legislature.
Yeah.
And I can understand people's vested interest and things like that. But yeah, if we really are, in the woke left is the last people to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think actually just really on this point real quick, this is why it's so dangerous to let China become this regional hegemon or allow China to dominate kind of the global world order, is because it's going to inevitably shift towards the cause of authoritarianism. And we're already seeing that in our global institutions. I've been to the World Trade Organization in Europe. I've been to the WHO, and China's dominated those institutions. And that has an impact on us here in the U.S. I mean, the WTO sets the trade terms in these deals. They adjudicate different trade disputes. And when China dominates those institutions, it impacts us. Or when China dominates the World Health Organization and, countries start replicating these lockdowns, you're seeing these social credit score systems. Or when China also can threaten states for speaking out against, what they're doing. So Australia said, look, we need an independent commission to study the origins of COVID-19. China used very significant trade restrictions and sanctions against Australia, which almost shut down their entire economy to make them shut up. So this is why it's so dangerous we fight back at China abroad, because inevitably it's going to come back and hit us at home. And that's why I think we have this two-pronged threat. We have domestically government overreach, which is violating our liberties. Abroad, we have China, which is potentially violating our security. And we have to take both of these threats very serious. And that's why I think we need someone in Congress who understands that, who can fight our enemies both domestic and foreign, because both of them pose a serious threat to our way of life.
So let's go back to what you say to mothers and fathers and individuals. I mean, we talked about listening and things like that, but how do you get them on board with your vision?
No, I think it's a good question. So I just met with some concerned parents, some from Utah Parents United, those type of organizations.
Well, I tell you, isn't that an impressive organization?
Oh, it's a very impressive organization.
Yeah, close to 30,000 members now. I mean, it's just, it amazes me how many of them that I've talked to. And I know a lot of people feel this way, but a lot of them just said, I felt like I needed to do something, right? Almost like it was a calling for them, right? But
I came away super impressed. And what I told them is, look, you're the men and women in the trenches, doing this fight. And I just think, at the congressional level, you need that backup. You need that cavalry to come in and help you guys. I mean, defining our school curriculums is going to be fundamentally at the state level, with great representatives like yourself. But I think there's some things Congress can do to support that. One, we need to cut off critical race theory funding at the federal level, which Tom Cotton has put forward a bill. Two, we need to actually enforce some of the restrictions on regulations on transparency for curriculums, which is the Protection of People Rights Act, which the feds, look, if you're going to put out a curriculum, parents have a right to know that.
Right.
Three, we need to start pushing.
And you're gonna face a buzzsaw from big tech on that issue.
Well, we need to talk about big tech because we need to break up that oligarchy. We need to start fighting back against them. We need to treat them as common couriers so that the government can regulate them. And we need to protect our civil liberties from big tech. I mean, they can violate our fundamental right to free speech. I've been restricted. I was just restricted for posting something about freeing Kyle Rittenhouse. Our liberties can be violated just as much from big tech as it can be by big government. But just again, going to our third point is, we need to start funding patriotic education, which was started with the 1776 Commission under President Trump, who had great scholars like Victor Davis Hanson on there, who I follow so closely. And we just saw with a bill yesterday about teaching the horrors of communism in our history classes. Most Americans have no clue about the horrors of communism, whether it was in China or the Soviet Union. We need to actually start teaching these things because we need people to realize the dangers of leftism. And I think the fourth point is, we need congressmen, we need representatives to start speaking out on cultural issues. And again, this is something with the old GOP they're not doing. Guys like Mitt Romney, even Blake Moore, they don't speak out against critical race theory. Again, I think this is something that should be done at the state level first and foremost. But we also need that support from our federal representatives who are saying, look, we're supporting you guys, and we're going to define the terms of this national conversation because it defines this Overton window. When our representatives don't speak out, we let the left control the narrative. I mean, that's what we saw with Kyle Rittenhouse, right?
Right.
As early on, they tried to portray him as this white supremacist. Most people on the left, they're so uninformed. They thought he just went to a BLM protest and shot black people. Yeah. I mean, they were shocked to find it was white people as well as
white supremacists,
criminals, child rapists. I mean, these were terrible people, and he was defending himself very clearly if you actually just put any effort to understanding it. But because representatives don't speak out against those issues, we have guys like Mitt Romney speaking out for Black Lives Matter last summer. He marched with them. He held up his fist for them. But he doesn't speak out for people like Kyle Rittenhouse because he's terrified of being ostracized by the media. We need to say, we don't care what the media thinks about us. We're going to start speaking out on these issues. And that's why I think we need representatives speaking out for things like critical race theory. We need to start, really driving that national conversation and supporting the states on these issues.
Yeah, very good. I agree with that. I think people largely don't want to be the lone wolf out there.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a problem, and I think by being the lone wolf, sometimes you can move people.
Yeah.
Make them realize that they're there for a reason.
Mm-hmm. I tell people, if I'm elected, I'll be one congressman among many. But if we just fight this battle one at a time, we get one more in, and another one, eventually we can start winning again. And there's kind of this defeatist attitude, I think, in the GOP right now. We've been seeing it the past few weeks in particular. But if we start getting that new generation in, we just one at a time, that's where the fight comes in. We'll eventually have enough, we'll get the momentum back and we'll start winning again.
One of the, I was actually delighted somewhat when Trump won, because I thought, oh, finally the end of the neocons.
Yeah, they're coming back. Yeah.
And they really are, aren't they?
Yeah.
This is a concerted effort.
Yeah.
To put them back into power.
Yep, they're led by Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Mitt Romney. And again, I come back to, why would Blake Moore vote for Liz Cheney as the third most powerful person in our party? Who's going to define the agenda for the Republican Party? You want neoconservatives who fight endless wars, who run up massive debt, who are terrified of speaking out on these cultural issues to be the figureheads of our party? No, we need a new right. We need a new GOP that works for the American family, that's focused on the flourishing of American family in our society, protecting our way of life.
It's interesting to me when I saw the memo from the Attorney General on parents that show up at school board meetings being domestic terrorists, and I just think, you mentioned the Overton window before, and I think a lot of people don't know what that is, but the idea is there's this window where people think these are acceptable things.
Bookmarks, yeah.
They're bookmarks, and they say, well, this is the right and this is the left. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But what happens is the left has pushed that so far that what used to be middle America, this idea of family values, of morality meaning something, has been pushed to the right-wing extremist.
So it's kind of interesting. When I first got into politics was in high school, again from my teacher, Miss McKay. And if you look at the GOP platform in 2004, if you look at the Democratic platform in 2004, it's essentially what the GOP platform is today. Most Republicans today would be Democrats 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's kind of the reverse. People like Bill Clinton, who had a terrible personal life, but him in the 90s, he would be considered a right wing, if not far right wing. He wanted to close the borders, traditional families, that type of thing. So we're letting the left dominate the conversation, and we need to start, actively fighting back against that, and just stop playing defense.
And see what's happened is that the libertarians, actually have come in and they've said, okay, we're very conservative, right?
Yeah.
Well, they are in terms of the economy, in terms of fiscal responsibility. Those issues are important, but if you look at their social policy, it's very leftist, right?
Look, if we leave a power void, it's going to be filled by someone else. So, if we just say, look, society, we don't care about our traditions, our culture, our value, just do whatever you want. The left is going to come in and dominate that conversation. And that's why it's so important. I don't think we should be abandoning institutions. I'm not anti-government. I'm for limited government that's held accountable to the people. It's effective. I think we need to start winning over these institutions and taking them back and having them fight for conservative values. I fully support parents who want to homeschool. I'm a big believer in charter schools, but I'm also not ready to raise the white flag on our public schools. Those belong to the people of the United States. We should take them back. Right. Let's make radical leftists, if they want to learn critical race theory, go learn that in your living room.
Right.
We're going to start teaching American patriotism in our schools because we need a cohesive society, and that's how you build a cohesive society. I think that's what gets lost a little bit on libertarians, is you kind of assume that people will stick together no matter what. But it takes active energy to build a society of a group of people to hold together. That's why we have a nation state. That's why we have a flag. It's a symbol. That's why we have a national anthem. That's why we have these, we teach about George Washington cutting down the apple tree. These type of things builds a culture, builds a society, and we have to actively do that. Because once we start dropping those rituals, those traditions, those customs, it just becomes chaos. And again, the left will fill that power void if we leave it. And that's why it's so important. Again, we fight for these institutions. I have hope.
when I see parents like UPU, I hate to bring them up again,
Yeah.
but I just think that they actually believe in the America that was in my generation, really.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when I was in college, most students were Republican.
Yeah.
It was the Reagan era,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Reagan had an ability to communicate to people, to communicate the ideals that our country was founded on, and that was mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the way people felt. And I've just seen a lot of these things being torn away. And that's the fear I have with the critical race theory, because it's secular humanism,
Mm-hmm.
right, on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
Because now it's almost like if you don't believe the way they do, then you don't belong in society anymore. You get canceled, right? You're on the outside, and I'm glad that there's parents that are waking up, that are saying, like this on Facebook. There's this lady from UPU that calls herself Laverne in the library, right? And she's gone through the school libraries in Utah. She's got a whole team, and they're digging up these books that are basically pornography that were given to fifth graders, right? And we have our governor of our state who come out and said, "Oh, we don't burn books in Utah." And I'm thinking, yeah, but we don't give them to children.
Yeah.
Things that are inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part of conservatism that I miss.
Yeah. I mean, we forget what that word means, right? Conservatism. We're trying to conserve our way of life. I mean, we're an exceptional nation. Again, I've been abroad. I've seen the worst of humanity. I've been in terrible countries that are governed by horrific people. I've seen what it can be. And that's why I really appreciate our American way of life, the Utah way of life. I mean, Utah itself has a special culture. And we have to fight to conserve that. Because again, if we just throw up our hands and just say, anyone can just do whatever they want, we're not going to fight for it anymore, the left will fill that power void. I was just speaking with someone, rather listening to a podcast about a mother who grew up in China during the Cultural Revolution. I mean, we're seeing the exact same things play out, dividing the class based upon classes, radicalizing our students. When you're these children, when you're 14, 15, you have so much energy and passion, and they're trying to turn that towards, fighting for the state, cultural vandalism, teaching you to hate your own country, hate your own ancestry. I mean, these type of things are horrific.
And an ancestry that's the greatest nation on the earth.
Exactly.
Right?
Which is so amazing that just people don't understand these things like representative government, a constitution, trial by jury. These type of Second Amendment, these type of things just didn't happen. I mean, these are the product of thousands of years of accumulation of human wisdom, which peaked and triumphed in the greatest country in the world. I mean, I think one thing about conservatism is what goes back to Edmund Burke. You have to ask, why were these customs put in place? If you actually stop and ask yourself those questions, you have to really think about it. And what conservatism does is that it allows the accumulation of our ancestors who said, look, this practice or this custom works, and it works over generations. And so that's why we adopt it, because we're but Edmund Burke also allowed for small changes. Sometimes you have to reform things on the edges here or there. But what we saw with the French Revolution is about, we have these intellectual elites who thought they could wipe clean their history, that they were smarter than their ancestors, that they know how to create a society. And what happened there? I mean, it went to bloodshed. Read about the Great Terror. It's absolutely horrific. And we're seeing the same thing. This left intellectual elite, they think they're smarter than our ancestors. They think they're smarter than all these traditions that have been accumulated in the Bible, in the Constitution. And they think they know how to govern society better. But they don't. They don't. I mean, listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson. And he talks about this a lot. I mean, there's a lot of collective wisdom built up in these institutions, built up in these customs. The one of them being due process, presumption of innocence before guilt. And the left.
Yeah, and you look at
Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what bothers me so much about that case.
Yeah.
Right? Is you clearly saw an orchestrated effort.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's not that the press was misinformed.
They knew the details.
They knew the details. They knew exactly what happened, but that wasn't in their narrative.
Yeah. I mean, two things, right? The FBI had drones flying over Kenosha, which in itself is quite shocking that we have the FBI flying drones over with HD cameras, and they knew exactly what happened. they lost that video footage from what I understand. So I mean, these are.
But it appeared, didn't it?
I think eventually they got it, but again, the left defined the narrative before we could get to it.
It's almost like it just got pushed somewhere.
Look, our founders, again, we're very brilliant people, and we have to ask why they instituted these certain things. I mean, what people don't realize is they were terrified of mob tyranny, of mob rule, just as much as they were terrified about tyranny by a king. There's tyranny of the one, the tyranny of aristocrats, the tyranny of the king of the many. So I mean, our rights can be violated by mob justice just as much as they can be by any king. And so that's what we're seeing with the left here, is that they're ready to discard these traditions, at the drop of the first hat. Look, Kyle Rittenhouse, he's guilty. He should be, thrown in prison. But we have these rights for a reason, because humans, when they get in that kind of mob mentality, they kind of go crazy and they violate these rights. And that's why it's so important we, really uphold our traditions, even when we disagree with them. That's the difficult part. You look at John Adams, right? He defended the British soldiers who fired on the Boston crowds at the Boston Massacre. It was very controversial because he was defending British soldiers, but he said, look, I believe in the rule of law, I believe in due process, and I'm going to apply that even to people I disagree with, who I vehemently hate. And that's what we don't see with the left. They're ready to discard these traditions at the drop of, at the first sign of that they think they're going to score political points. And again, going back to this point again, what's so important is that the establishment GOP are letting them get away with it. They don't speak up for these issues. These cultural issues are so important. And that's why we need representatives to actually start fighting for them.
Beautiful. Andrew Badger, we've been talking to today, and I really appreciate you coming in. We're out of time, and I'd like you though, kind of look into this camera over here and just kind of give your pitch, right?
Thanks, Senator. I really appreciate it. Our country is in crisis. Our borders are broken. Our gas is unaffordable. Our children are being taught to hate in our schools. In this crisis, the question for you, the voter, is the establishment GOP getting the job done? And if not, is there a candidate who has the qualifications, the experience necessary to fight effectively to protect our Constitution from threats both domestic and foreign? Over the past few weeks, I've been able to speak with a lot of voters across the district. What I come away with is this: Utahns are fighters. We're pioneers. We're cowboys. We're entrepreneurs. It's time we start fighting back. It's time we take back our schools, empower parents, not unions. It's time we secure our border and protect our sovereignty as a nation. And it's time we secure our elections and restore confidence in their outcomes. I played in the state championship game at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and one thing our coach said was, leave everything on the field. Utah shaped me into the man I am today. It gave me an education that taught me to love my country. It prepared me to go to war abroad, but also succeed in the business world. I am so grateful for this state and everything it's given me. And I promise you, I will fight for this state, for the people of Utah. I will leave everything on the field, because it's time we take back our country, and we can do it together. And that's why I ask that you join me, because we have a country to save.
We'll see you next week.